Hey there, Skullheads. I'm Snags.
And I'm Old Silky using a coaster.
Alrighty there. This week we are talking about the mighty, legendary, one of the top hard rock bands of the '70s, along with Sabbath and Zeppelin, would be the mighty Deep Purple. I'm gonna lay this shit down for you.
I wanted to throw in, since you mentioned Zepp and Sabbath, that if you listen to metal at all, three bands would be the triumvirate of that entire genre, and that's Zeppelin, Sabbath, Deep Purple. Zeppelin was like raw blues power with a bit of peace and love. I never agreed with it, but they would always kind of refer to Zeppelin as being more of a hippie band.
Well, you had the going to California kind of thing every now and then.
And Stairway to Heaven. Does anybody remember Laughter and all that?
And quoting Lord of the Rings in your lyrics.
Yeah. Whereas Sabbath was doom, horror, heavy. And then Deep Purple, as we get into it, we're kind of going to take you through what their sound was. But they had classical with heavy, and they found a perfect mix after that.
It's a mix of classical blues and just heavy rock.
But I feel like you had almost like a birds all flying together, weaving in and out, shooting through the sky.
That's a great analogy. Yeah,
you had Deep Purple, Sabbath, Zeppelin, and probably Queen, as far as that precise electric guitar, and soaring to they ruled the 70s,
Yeah. Yep. I would agree.
But we don't really need to ever do a Queen episode. We've mentioned them enough. Down the road we could. I'm not opposed.
I think if we did, we'd have to get a Queen expert on here to mix it up, because we both respect that. We both respect that band, but I neither of us really listen to them that much. They're fucking amazing. The songs, I just know the hits, and all the hits are just fucking amazing masterpieces.
When Queen, I'll tell you this: when Queen is good, they are fucking amazing. And then there's a lot of stuff that just kind of lost me, either being too operatic or proggy in a way. Just not. But let's get going. Let's get cracking on
all right.
DP.
Obviously, and by DP, you don't mean double penetration.
No, not VDVA or whatever, all that shit.
You mean Purple. Deep Purple? Okay, just making sure.
This is episode 89, kids at home. So Mark 1, you had from the Searchers, a guy in the Searchers, I think it was the Searchers, was like a little offshoot project, and he had a few of the guys, and it just was going nowhere. And Nick Simper and John Lord, Nick Simper being the bass player, John Lord's like, look, we're gonna do something different here. We're gonna get off the ground with this idea he had, and he was plagued with this idea of getting like classical keyboard, mixing it with rock, and so he gets Richie Blackmore from a band called the Outlaws. Although that was early, Blackmore had played with a ton of people, kind of like
he was a session cat like Jimmy Page. Yeah.
So they get Rod Evans on vocals, Richie Blackmore guitar, John Lord, Nick Simper bass, and Ian Pace on drums. And Ian Pace, much like John Bonham, is a fucking beast.
He is an amazing drummer.
Ian Pace is a monster.
I've been marathoning Purple in preparation for this episode, just kind of refreshing my purple knowledge, and just really reminded what a great fucking drummer that cat was.
I mean, he's just a savage, and I feel like Bill Ward is just a completely different, more of a jazz drummer. Well,
also,
Ian Pace was too.
Yeah. Ian Pace is somewhere on the spectrum between Bonham and Ward. I think Ward was really jazzy, and Bonham was like the ultimate rock drummer, and Ian Pace is kind of somewhere in between. But they're all just amazing. I mean, there's no drummers that could come close to those cats. You know, no. Ginger Baker,
yeah,
the only one.
Yeah, and you know, Ginger Cream had Toad, and Zeppelin had Moby Dick, and Deep Purple had the Mule. Also Mandrake Root before that. And then Sabbath's jam song back in the day was Wicked World, where they would let Bill Ward just air out the drums. But they got away from that, you know, but all of these bands would jam. And I feel like Zeppelin was the best at it. And I'll touch on that. I want to get started with the first album. Their first 3 albums are riddled with cover songs.
Let me drop one tidbit in here before we. They eventually became. They're also kind of in. I think the side project was called Roundabout, and then
that's it. I couldn't remember the name.
Yeah, and they Lord and Semper, so they were and they're also involved in some other bands, the Flower Pot Men and the Maze. They almost settled on the name Concrete God before they decided Deep Purple instead. I thought that was an interesting alternate name there.
Interesting.
Anyways,
I did not know that.
Hip us to the lowdown on that first album.
So the first album comes out, and if you're familiar with British bands in the late 60s, everything was kind of bluesy, and Rod Evans had a very proper English singer, a very deep voice, and
so the lineup at this point is Rod Evans vocals, Nick Semper bass, John Lord keyboards, Ian Pace drums, and Blackmore guitar.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. And so it's a bit primitive, this first album, in comparison to Zeppelin 1 and Black Sabbath. I will jump ahead.
You know, unlike those other 2 bands, they did not wow us on that first album.
So Zeppelin 1 came out January 13th of 69.
Mm-hmm.
Black Sabbath's first album, February 13th, 1970.
Right.
And so Deep Purple, July of 68. So if you want to look at it as Deep Purple does an album, then Richie Blackmore hears Zeppelin and Sabbath and goes, Jesus Christ, what the fuck are we doing? You know? So that's my thought, that, you know, in a way, they're third and slowly would try to catch up to the other 2 with what those other 2 albums did. But
they were kind of bouncing around at first.
Yeah. I will say a bit primitive in comparison. Standout tracks for Shades of Deep Purple is obviously Hush, a fucking kick-ass first song, single. Starts with this howling wolf out in the, echoing out. Bizarrely, if you think about it, Sabbath's first album would be this chilling little bell off in the distance. So there's a similarity there to me.
And that's where the similarities end between those 2 albums.
Hush is a great fucking song.
It is. It's a jam. I said a jam. And it was a cover song. Joe South did it first, and there are a couple other people covering it, but back then people would cover a song. If a song was a hit, you'd have 1 or 2 or 3 other people would release it in the next couple of years.
Would get old. you get a song that you like, and then somebody does the exact same you're like, really?
Imagine like I Love It Loud came out, and then Motley Crue did their version, and fucking Slaughter did their version. It'd be weird.
Just really sad. But so Hush is the lead single. Great song. If they never did anything else, that song would still be around on things.
Oh, they'd be a one-hit wonder, yeah.
That band that did Hush. But they have a song called One More Rainy Day, which I always like that song. It's on that first album. And then Mandrake Root on that first album. Great fucking tune. This would be like a 40-minute live jam.
That became an early live jam for them. They were
into 1970.
They were rocking that with Ian Gillan in the band. Still.
Yeah. I think until they did the Mule. I think the Mule kind of, hey, let's leave this whole shit behind.
Yeah.
But Mandrake Root, great tune, and then the covers. I'm So Glad they did a version of Help by the Beatles and Hey Joe.
Mm-hmm.
And so really, I can't figure out why Shades of Deep Purple is not available in any of the streaming places.
I'm not sure why. I know Hush is, but that's it. But the interesting thing about their cover of Help, they did it the way John Lennon originally intended it. So John Lennon, he was feeling overwhelmed, as he often did. He probably was the most insecure of the Beatles emotionally. And he was feeling overwhelmed and not entirely happy after all that success. And he wrote the song Help as a plea for help. And he meant it to be this slow, kind of moving, plaintive song. And George Martin and probably the rest of the band convinced him to speed it up and make it into more of a, shake our mop heads and go, woo.
More of an awesome song.
Yeah. And Deep Purple covered it. I think it was Rod Evans' idea. He came to audition with them and he said, "Hey, I got this idea."
Yeah, that was his audition piece.
Yeah, let's do Help, but let's do it slow. He may have even heard John Lennon say that in an interview, maybe where he got the idea.
You never know. But that first album is strong enough, just on the songs I mentioned, that it should be streaming, and it's not. Which there's
some fucked up reason. I'm sure
legality. I'm sure. I'm reminded of Judas Priest's first two records where they, can't really, but those are available. But anyway, so
they were also influenced heavily at this point by Vanilla Fudge, which makes me want to go back and I know John Bonham was heavily influenced by Carmine Appice's drumming in Vanilla Fudge. And
that first record is filthy.
I got to go back. It starts out with a really slow song, and I've just never gotten past it. But I got to go back and just marathon the Vanilla Fudge.
I would tell you their first 4 or 5 Vanilla Fudge are just great, and it's a good template for what Sabbath and Zeppelin, because they were all hearing each other. They were all ripping here and there. But so their second album, Book of Taliesin, October of '68, and this is bizarre. They do a cover of Kentucky Woman and actually have a hit with it.
Mm-hmm.
That Neil Diamond tune. And then another song on there is Anthem. And then they do a cover, River Deep Mountain High, and Wring That Neck, which I believe would be called Hard Road in America. But Wring That Neck is a fucking killer instrumental.
They were under a lot of pressure after they came right out of the gate with a hit with Hush, and they were under a lot of pressure those next 2 albums from the record company. Let's get another hit. Let's get it. Mm-hmm. And that's part of why they're flailing around just grabbing cover songs from everywhere, because they just want to have another hit.
They were trying to write songs. Anthem is a good one. And Wring That Neck is a really catchy riff. So, they were basically psychedelic rock, prog rock, and hard rock.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Blackmore is, with the second album, kind of starting to write more versus that first album. But the first album, like I said, there's some standout tracks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the 8 songs I actually wrote on, so it's, that first album is decent for what it is. Everyone's got to start somewhere. But then Book of Taliesin, they're touring, they're just nonstop on the road, and like you said, they're being hounded to write more of their own stuff. And by the late 60s, the Beatles are writing their own songs, the Stones are writing their own songs. I feel like you said, there were tons of people covering each other, but you weren't going to get very far if you didn't start writing your own shit.
Yep. Yeah, there's a famous story about the Stones manager locking Keith and Mick in a room and don't come out until you write a fucking song.
They were locked in the kitchen.
Yeah. We will do a 3-part Stones series at some point. That'll be another 3 episode. Yeah.
That's going to be huge. Anyway, so June of 69, you see how close these albums are coming. They put 2 out in 68. June of 69, this is going to be a heavier album. There's a lot of friction early, and they'd only been together 3 years,
right,
or 2 years by this point, between Blackmore and Lord. They had a lead-off single called Amaretta.
Is this the album, the self-titled album, Deep Purple?
Yeah, self-titled Deep Purple. Yeah.
Got it.
And Blackmore wanted to take the band to heavier depths. So he just did not feel Rod Evans or Nick Simper were really
at that point. At that point, you're up against Robert Plant and Ozzy. Although he, I wouldn't say he's the same level of singer as someone like Robert Plant, but he had his own sound, and it was a higher pitched voice that goes. When you're playing that heavy music, unless you're going for the Cookie Monster Slayer sound,
right? Yeah,
it helped back then to have that contrast of the cat hitting the high notes while your band is just rocking the low ends.
And Rod Evans was more into the pop sound. This it's a genre that's gone now.
Yeah.
But if you listen to late 60s British music, you had the guy that just stood there and gave this booming baritone voice like Rod Evans.
Yeah.
Good singer, but you just no stage. I'm sure he just stood there.
Yeah. Blackmore wanted somebody who could wail.
Yeah, and so enter Ian Gillan and Roger Glover, and they really fucked Nick Simper and Rod Evans over. They just didn't tell them.
Well, the note about Glover is originally they were just looking to replace Ian Gillan, and Ian and Rod
Evans.
I'm sorry, looking to replace Rod Evans, and Ian and Roger were in a band together called Episode 6, which was a British pop band.
Yeah.
So Ian's going to audition for this band that had that hit Hush, and says to Roger, "Why don't you come along? You can just hang out." And Roger gets there, and Nick's not there, and they're like, "Well, why don't you jam on bass with us?" And then he's fucking better than Nick, and Ian Pace is like, "Hey, let's keep this guy." So it's just by chance that Nick got fucked out of his job.
And they were working on a new song called Hallelujah.
Yeah.
Which Ian Gillan sings on. And that song is on Deep Purple. But I don't think
it's not on the concerto for group and orchestra. No. I don't know those albums too well.
No, the concerto. So right as they get this solid lineup, Richie Blackmore, Ian Gillan,
they go left field and do an Elder.
They go left
Here he is. It's the Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Deep Purple rules.
Say Deep
Purple rules.
All right. El Condor in the house. Pimp the website.
Go check out the Snags and Silky website. We got mugs. We got T-shirts. We got calculators.
Calculators.
Calculators. Yeah. That's news to us. But yeah.
Action figures.
Yeah.
All right.
Funko Pop.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just
Lego
blowing out the door.
Hot Wheels. We got Hot Wheels.
Video games. Hot Wheels.
Wow.
Cracker Jacks.
All right.
Peanuts and popcorn.
Wow.
And candy.
And candy. Yeah,
right.
That's right.
Thank you,
It's
sir.
all there. Snagsandsilky.com. Go check it out.
Unbelievable. Calculators.
Yeah. There you go.
So that lineup, Richie Blackmore, Ian Gillan, Roger Glover, John Lord, Ian Pace, and suddenly John Lord had been working with the Philharmonic to try and set this show up. And the band, especially Blackmore's like, what the fuck are you doing? We're not we're going to be a one-off band. No one's going to take seriously. He was very upset, but they agreed to do it. John Lord swears up and down, look, we're just going to do this and it'll elevate the band. And then we can, go and do our thing.
Right.
Which is kind of what happened. But September of 1969, they get with Concerto for Group and Orchestra. It's them live with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. And so that album, like, you listen to it out of respect for Deep Purple.
I don't think I have ever listened to it.
I didn't even include tracks from it. But
it was that to be fair, it was a pioneering concept because since then everybody and their brother has done it. Kiss did it, Metallica did it.
Metallica.
Everybody's done it since then.
Just so no one's confused, if you look this up and you see, maybe you're looking on Amazon or you're looking on eBay because you want to actually have the actual product, there's a very 60s looking cover that's Concerto for Group and Orchestra, and that will probably have 3 movements. Movement 1, movement 2, part 1, movement 2, part 2, and then movement 3.
Oh, wait, and then the bonus track is Bowel Movement.
Yes. So there'll be 4 tracks on that, but the full version of that show would be reissued in 2002, where they actually like what Metallica did. They do trying to see where I put that. They actually do 4 other songs. Oh, I have it. I thought I added it later. They played Hush, Wring That Neck, and Child in Time with the orchestra, as well as a song that's I believe it's blended into Movement Part 2 that Ian Gillan wrote backstage before they went on, and so he performs it for the first time with the orchestra.
That's interesting too, because Child in Time was on the next album,
right?
So that wasn't even released yet,
right? So I want to, now that I know that, I want to track down that reissue just to hear, because that's what's always been missing from this record. If you get it and you just have the movements, the Philharmonic Orchestra, it's like I'm listening to classical music and that sounds like Ian Pace, and I can tell that's Richie Blackmore, but it's just, they don't got the recognizable Purple jams in there. So it's not appealing to you as a rock listener,
right? It's not like Kiss Symphony Alive 4, where you got a bunch of Kiss songs. That one has the amazing Tommy Thayer on it.
So anyway, Concerto for Group and Orchestra, you'll see in 2004 they redo the whole thing, and they have Dio come in and sing on stuff.
Really?
Yeah. He sings a song that was in that side project.
So they re-recorded. They just re-recorded it with guest singers and stuff.
Well, so they get back together and they get another orchestra and they do a newer.
That lineup of Purple with Steve Morris and those cats.
Probably, yeah.
Got it. Okay.
And then John Lord had this thing, or it might have been Roger Glover. They had a solo thing in like 71, 72 called the Butterfly Ball. And that was a huge thing. And Dio actually sang on that album.
I remember hearing about that. Yeah.
They bring him back in 2004 to jam that song.
Oh,
so
wow,
it was kind of a big deal. But that's also called Concerto for Group and Orchestra. So it was a thing that John Lord kind of took with him and did several attempts at perfecting his vision for that.
Got it. Yeah. He was a heady cat.
Cat. But that's all you need to know about that album.
Yeah. Let's move on.
Yeah. It becomes their fourth album, but but anyway.
Next is the first album in their holy trinity, as far as I'm concerned.
So that's why I put this note in here. Zeppelin 1, January of 1969, Sabbath, February 13th, 1970, and then June of 1970, Deep Purple steps up and knocks a fucking just a home run out of the park in rock.
Yes. What an album.
It's a game changer.
Yeah.
And so before In Rock, Blackmore tells John Lord while they're on touring during those first records, every time I step on stage, I'm going to try and blow you out of the water. And
he said that to Ian Gillan.
Oh,
him and Ian Gillan had that conversation.
It was that was directed at John Lord.
When Ian Gillan joined, he said, "Don't take this the wrong way, but every time I step on stage, I'm gonna try to blow you out of the water." And Ian's like the new guy in the band. He's like, "Okay, well, fucker. I guess I'll try to blow you out of the water." And he goes, "Good, then we'll have a good band."
Yeah. So there was that right at the beginning with In Rock touring, and but I mean, there's not a bad song on Speed King, Black Knight being the lead-off single, which they thought was just a throwaway tune. That was the B-side, and Black Knight is a fucking killer jam.
Yeah, that wasn't even on the album proper, but in the playlist, you got to have it with that album because it was, like you said, it was a B-side. Fucking Child in Time, Child in Time. I'm jumping. I was about
fire.
Yeah, just a solid fucking album.
Hard Loving Man. Dude. I can recall going down the highway, some sort of road trip where the windows would not go all the way up, and it was sleeting.
Nice.
Bitter fucking cold.
Only you or me would have a story about flying down the highway when it's sleeting and the windows won't go all the way up.
The windows won't go up.
It's a total Snags or Silky story.
I wish I could remember why, but I'm literally driving down the road with, every coat I have, a blanket on me, a blanket under me, freezing my ass off and driving, and Child in Time just
nice
blasting and just just going, and I'm man. Fuck, this is, and I was in a zone, man.
I bet.
And to this day, whenever I hear that song, I think about that specific road trip. There were other people in the car that were all huddled up and die. We were all freezing our asses off. And I can't remember who was in the car. I can't remember where we were going, why we were in such cold weather.
I hate cold weather so much that I would definitely remember if I was there, and I'm really glad I wasn't, because that sounds terrible. I mean, the soundtrack is great.
That Child in Time, I was probably the only one in the car that was like, holy shit, this is, but so if you think about at this time, they're touring In Rock, massive jams when you go see these bands. Black Sabbath doing 20-minute Wicked World, Zeppelin doing Moby Dick, Dazed and Confused, Whole Lot of Love. Those were just, that's an hour of music right there, And then Deep Purple, Mandrake Root, Mule, Space Truckin', Lazy, Child in Time. Those were all, very, and that was the thing, is these bands would only come around so often, but when you saw them, they're going to play like 8 songs.
20-minute versions of the song. And the thing is, you're only paying $5 for the ticket. But if you want a good seat, you got to camp out all night in front of the record store.
Yeah. Those were the days. But, when you go back and get some of these live albums and you're like, fuck, man, they're 5 songs,
Yeah, but there's a place for that. There's a place for that. If you're fucking Deep Purple, I'll listen to it. If you're Widespread Panic, I don't want to hear
hell no.
Your 20-minute songs. But Deep Purple, I'll totally listen to it.
But I will say this, and this is a perfect time to bring this up.
Right.
I feel like Zeppelin were masters at the jam.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Where Deep Purple, I feel like Richie Blackmore was so aware of how amazing he was that he would noodle and just, you're like, what are we doing? Some of Mandrake Root is, you're like, can we reel it back in, 40 minutes of that,
Yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, all those guys were virtuoso. Yeah, they really were. But the power balance in Deep Purple versus Zeppelin's a very similar situation where you got this experienced guitar player who gets a band together, but he really found some heavyweights who people rave about Bonham's drumming just as much as they rave about Jimmy Page.
Yeah.
And John Paul Jones was an amazing bass player and keyboard player and even producer.
Orchestrator, really.
Yeah, and Plant is legendary. He really brought people on who were equal to him. Yeah. And I think Purple, they're all virtuosos, but there is that edge that Blackmore had in both personality and in talent, where he like you're saying, he could draw the attention a little bit too much to him in these long jams. And that was just part of the problem.
Yeah.
One of the issues.
There's footage of them live in 72. It's like amazing footage where you really get to see Ian Gillan playing the bongos and singing, and just he's got his little brown vest on.
I've mentioned this before, but I saw Gillan at the Fox Theater in Atlanta fronting Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
And when they played Supernaut and he was jamming on the bongos on that song, along with the Bevan, the Electric Light Orchestra drummer they had, it was fucking amazing.
Wow.
He was amazing.
Yeah.
Him with that band live was really fucking good, and they played "Smoke on the Water." They threw that in.
I wonder, how do you feel about that?
What, that they played
doing "Smoke on the Water"?
Oh, we all went fucking nuts, dude.
That's great.
We're watching Ian Gillan sing "Smoke on the Water," man. It was awesome.
You can't, and at the time there was no Deep Purple for you to
exactly. See. Yeah, they were just it was amazing. Supernaut was the highlight of the show because that song jammed so much, and he rocked the vocals all the way through. He's a great singer. And then he just starts wailing on the congas during that song that we just went nuts when he's doing that. It's amazing.
All right, so come back to Fireball comes out July of 71. I love this record. Ian Gillan calls it his favorite of all the Purple, which is kind of weak.
There's a theory on that.
Yeah.
Is that Richie Blackmore really hates that album, and Ian Gillan and Richie Blackmore really hate each other. And the theory is he just says that to piss off Richie Blackmore.
I love it. That's even better.
Yeah.
But this album, I will say, is very experimental if you look at In Rock, Fireball, Machine Head, Made in Japan, who do we think we are? The classic Mark II output.
Right.
Fireball's more of there's like these talking story songs. Demon's Eye, The Mule, Strange Kind of Woman, Fireball. There's a B-side, I'm Alone. I love that song, and it's not in the streaming bit, but if you track down Fireball, the 25th anniversary, you can hear that B-side.
Well, Strange Kind of Woman and The Mule are two classic Purple songs that lasted their entire, career.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, Fireball's a killer.
Yeah. The album cover to me is a bit cheesy, It reminds me of what was that? What's that? Why am I drawing a blank on the band? The band that had the documentary and they got the comeback after they had the documentary.
Oh, Anvil.
Anvil. Didn't they have an album called Juggernaut?
They did.
It looks like that would be the cover to an album called Juggernaut.
Right. The Fireball, I dig Fireball. But it sandwiched between In Rock and Machine Head.
It's hard to stand up. How you gonna match those two? That's not until Burn comes out. Burn is the next album that's in that level.
That's the talent that this band has. They continue to punch you in the face. In Rock, you're like, holy fuck.
Yeah. In Rock is just amazing. It's such a good album.
It is epic. And then Machine Head comes out December of 1971. They go to Switzerland, Montreux. And during a Zappa concert at the Montreux Casino, some guy shoots a flare into this thatch roof above the stage. So you had the stage and like all this tiki bar type palm frond.
Are you saying that Frank Zappa and the Mothers were at the best place in town?
They were at the best place around.
Some stupid with a flare gun burnt the place to the ground?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
That's what you're saying.
And Funky Claude was an actual person who was literally pulling kids out of the basement windows where the stage was, pulling them out of the ground, essentially. Saved a lot of people as this whole fucking just boom.
Well, the interesting backstory to this album was it was supposed to be a double album. So they were the part that came out as Machine Head minus Smoke on the Water was going to be one side of the album, studio recorded. Then they were going to record some more songs live in that venue that got burnt down.
Oh, wow. I did not.
That was going to be the second disc was them. And I don't know if it was going to be like a live album of previous songs or they had other songs they were going to do live, but there was going to be half studio, half live, double album. It would not have been a song called Smoke on the Water because that venue would have been there for them to record the live part in. That's why they had the Rolling Stones mobile unit.
Right.
And then that fucker burned it down and it became a single album with their most well-known song on it that they wrote about the fucker burning it down.
That's and I actually, in all of my Zappa stuff, I actually have them live there because they were recording that show. So I actually have the show of them playing.
When we do our Zappa episode, we got to have the cats from Wet Shoelaces on. They're both total Zappa maniacs.
Oh, yeah,
and I know Alan's listening to this, so Alan, tell Steve this is going to happen. Yeah. Zappa episode, all four of us.
Yeah, that'd be great. And it would. With Zappa, I'd want to take some time and do the Mothers, and then separate, or just talk, whatever.
It'll be a long episode, is what you're saying, with lots of notes. Yeah.
So Machine Head comes out and just takes them to even greater heights. And now, finally, I feel like when you talk about Zeppelin and Sabbath, here's, granted they came out first, but I would say without a doubt they had to be heavily influenced by Zeppelin and Sabbath at this point.
I don't. Yeah, for sure. And they were also Richie Blackmore was big into Cream, so
okay,
that influenced the whole in rock direction too.
Yeah, but so with Machine Head, I just feel like now you can confidently stand on your own 2 feet. Those first 3 records, much like Pantera's first 3 records, are left. Let's
Well,
not even talk about.
At least Deep Purple admits to them being around.
Well, true. Yeah,
Pantera, those guys just they really pretended like they didn't
and
exist.
those should 1,000% be out and available, which it sucks. But anyway, Made in Japan comes out, possibly the greatest live album ever. Made in Japan and In Rock, put those two together, and you're like, we don't have to do anything else. Here's our live album. Here's our studio album.
I had Machine Head and Made in Japan on vinyl back in the day when I was a kid, and I felt like that's all I needed at the time. But since then, I've discovered In Rock and Burn, which are both amazing.
So with Made in Japan, and you can say like Fireball really kind of falls in between the cracks unfairly, I think, with all these other albums. But Made in Japan is just amazing live. It's they had the set list, they had the strength in the song choices. The Mule from Made in Japan, fuck, that's Ian Pace. It's amazing. But Zeppelin and the Sabs, it's so difficult to choose between the two, and I feel like at this point Deep Purple really separates and becomes their own monster by 1972.
Well, at that point in 72, they were fucking huge.
Yeah,
they were selling out arenas everywhere. They were a monster band at that point.
And I know by 73 they were the top selling band in the United States.
Interesting.
Which is nuts.
Yeah.
But so Who Do We Think We Are comes out. Woman from Tokyo. Mary Long is a strong standout track on there. Super Trooper. My favorite though is Rat Bat Blue on Who Do We Think We Are.
This basically they record Made in Japan. They're touring around the world, and this is when the rot sets in between Richie Blackmore and Ian Gillan, to the point where Ian Gillan wouldn't go into the studio when they were recording the music. So they would lay down tracks. He would come in when they weren't there and add vocals. So that recording session was one of those really tension filled, and barely saw each other because he just
sucks.
And he had actually quit the band by then. So they before they did the tour, that they did a tour before Who Do We Think We Are came out.
Yeah.
He quit the band then. It was 10 months before he left when he quit. And they were like, well, can you do this tour? And then we got to do another album. Can you do the album? And he was nice enough to stick around, but he had already fucking quit.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that sucks because you think of a kid in 72, 73, Deep Purple's one of his favorite bands. And, Ian Gillan leaving, you're like, holy, what the fuck? That's heavy. And what's funny is before, early issues with the band is you had half the band would show up in the morning ready to go, ready to record, and the other side of the band had been partying all night long.
And they would show up later.
And let and if you're in a rock band, lighten up. You don't go to bed at 8:30 and fuck off.
Come on, you don't have to do what the rest of us have to do.
Enjoy it. You're drinking, you're stinking, you're seeing how many holes you can fill. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, so February of 74, they do it again. Burn comes out. with a brand new. Now this is similar to Ronnie James Dio. Here's a completely new band.
I made a mental note to say this is similar to Heaven and Hell because they come out, they replace the singer, and they just destroy the previous album. Destroy it. They fucking demolished it.
Yeah. They just here, let me just break every piece of that out.
Yeah, right. And so Richie Blackmore had a kind of a vision after he kind of ran Ian Gillan off, basically. Mm-hmm. And he was hearing this cat in this band called Trapeze playing some really cool bass, just virtuoso bass player, and had a cool voice. He's like, I want to get that guy, and then I want to get a lead singer. I want to have dual vocals. And so Roger Glover saw the writing on the wall too, as Richie's talking about this shit. And he's like, well, you're getting another bass player. I guess I'm leaving too.
Wow.
So
that's what happened.
So they bring in Glenn Hughes on bass. They're auditioning lead singers. The first guy that comes to audition is this guy named David Coverdale. So that was quick.
And David was, he worked in a clothing shop.
Yeah. He's working in a clothing boutique. Yeah.
Just kill me. I'm dead.
Yeah.
Awful.
So you get those two in there, and David Coverdale's got this bluesy kind of lower register voice.
And I really think this was an attempt at a Paul Rodgers kind of heavily influenced.
That was his original. That's what he wanted originally, was Paul Rodgers. That's who he wanted. He wanted Glenn Hughes from Trapeze and Paul Rodgers from Bad Company, and they couldn't get Paul.
Free.
Free. This is before Bad. Yeah. And he couldn't get Paul Rodgers. Wow. And they find this cat, David Coverdale's got a similar kind of soulful voice.
Yeah.
And they just and Glenn Hughes brought this funk vibe with him. And
they turned into a blues funk thing.
That album just fucking Sail Away. Fucking amazing.
So Burn, the title track, Just Take Your Life, Sail Away, Mistreated.
The whole fucking thing is brilliant. That's why I'm like, I think the Holy Trinity for Deep Purple, if you're not including live albums, studio album Holy Trinity is In Rock, Machine Head, and Burn. That's the top tier cream of the crop shit.
You can't. And then flash forward to last year. Out of fucking nowhere, I'm down in just, swamp gut, Florida.
Every article you read that starts with the words Florida man, that's somebody Silky knows.
Yeah. Glenn Hughes, of all people, Glenn Hughes comes down to the ranch, which is a bar down here, and he plays the fucking entire Burn album, a few Deep Purple stuff.
I bet that was awesome.
Dude, it was like, shut the fuck. It's a random Tuesday. I'm there, and there's maybe 30 people on a wood dance floor up at the stage. I'm 3 feet away from Glenn Hughes, watching him.
What the fuck is wrong with people?
And I'm like, okay, I'm glad I'm here, and there's not 8 billion. Why the fuck is no one else here?
Yeah, that's insane.
And Glenn Hughes played that bar like it was the goddamn Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
He came out and just destroyed. I could not believe how good it was. And what was funny is if you closed your eyes, Gunther Gables on guitar.
Was Richie Blackmore?
Yeah. He had Gus Wheeler on guitar.
Yeah, that's the name I was gonna say. I was just trying to remember that scene from the Dirty Hair.
He's got this guy on
guitar. Gus
guitar.
Wheeler.
He's got this guy on guitar. He's like, this is my guitar player. He's been with me for 30 years. Whatever. Right. But when you closed your eyes, it was Richie Blackmore. Note for fucking note. Every song.
Nice.
When you wanted to hear, he was doing it. And
nice.
They didn't play Child in Time, but anyway,
Right.
the Burn and all that. This guy was amazing, but I'm like, in life you can play as good as Hendrix, but you're not Hendrix.
Yeah. A lot of it is timing and connections. I always say life is it's 50-50. It's 50% of what you do and who you are, and then it's 50% of and then it's 50% of shit you can't control.
Yeah, because
and
this guitar player is that fucking good, but you're not going to know his name, and he can walk down the street and you're never going to.
Right. Yeah. The other half of it is you have to be in the right place, happen to be in the right place at the right time, and the world has to meet you halfway.
That guy's touring with Glenn Hughes, and probably, I would hope he's got
we're getting up and going to jobs every day, so he's got it better than we do, probably.
Yeah. Just the curse though is, would you have that talent and no one gives a shit who you are?
Yeah.
It's
kind of like if you had a podcast and Joe Rogan's getting millions of dollars, and nobody gives. Yeah, and we're obviously more brilliant than him.
Oh, completely, dude. Do you
Plus,
think
there's
he does
two of
his
us.
own research?
You get two for the price of one at the Snags and
Silky. Do you think Joe Rogan does any research?
No, he lays on a hammock drinking margaritas.
Fake.
And then he shows up and they give him his notes and
they hand him.
That guy obviously does no thinking and no introspection whatsoever.
No, he's an automatron.
Yeah.
So now Stormbringer, November 1974. The song Stormbringer to me is one of the baddest fucking tunes.
That's a good song.
Goddamn good.
That's a solid track, yeah.
And the rest of that album's not quite as good as Stormbringer, but Lady Double Dealer, Highball Shooter, it's a good album.
Yeah, I think Lady Double Dealer, if I recall correctly, is David Coverdale. He was dating some chick and he goes out on tour, or goes probably out on tour, but he was away from his apartment for a while and he comes back and she had just totally trashed it.
Oh shit.
Yeah. And maybe robbed it. I forget. I'd have to look it up. But that's
so that's the end. That's the end of the Mark III lineup. They did manage to put out Live in Europe, which is a decent representation of the Burn tour, 1975. And then so Mark IV, the lineup, they get Tommy Bolin, who was in Zephyr. He was also in the James Gang after Joe Walsh left, and then Deep Purple. So Tommy Bolin on guitar, David Coverdale vocals still, Glenn Hughes, John Lord, and Ian Pace. Richie Blackmore out of the fucking band by 1975.
Well, here's this story about Richie leaving. Is he was so used to dominating the band, and then he kind of ended up regretting bringing Glenn in, because I'm getting this from a documentary that we'll post on the website. He kind of regretted bringing Glenn in because Glenn was a total fucking rock star. Like David Coverdale was learning his bearings, getting his bearings on those two tours, and became a rock star later. But Glenn Hughes was a fucking rock star, and he had a lot of charisma. He took a lot of attention on the stage. Richie Blackmore had a rule: if you walk over on my side of the stage, I will hit you with my guitar.
Oh wow!
So everybody's raving about this new cat, Glenn Hughes, and taking attention away from him. And Glenn Hughes he was really down with the funk. He loved James Brown and all that shit. So if you listen to those two albums, they're funkier than the earlier stuff. And Stormbringer, part of its loss of direction, after that title track, all of Burn and the song Stormbringer are a good mix of Deep Purple hard rock with a little bit of funk sprinkled in there. And then he kind of dragged that album, Glenn Hughes did, into more kind of funk territory. It was less rocking and more. There's some light R&B kind of influences. And stuff.
Yeah. It just you're like, what the fuck?
And Blackmore wasn't down with all that, and he was tired of arguing, and he wanted a band he could control.
Yeah.
And so that's why he left. And he went and formed a band he could control and dropped 3 more classic fucking albums with Rainbow.
Right. So Come Taste the Band, 1975, Lady Luck, Drifter, Love Child, You Keep on Moving, a really good song. And then one of the standout tracks, Glenn Hughes sings it. It's called This Time Around. And it is like a fucking Stevie Wonder. It's just incredible.
Stevie Wonder was another big influence on him. Yeah. Literally. Yeah.
That's phenomenal. And then, so 76.
Wait. 75 on that tour.
Yeah.
I want to just drop a story real quick.
Yeah.
About where they were playing in Indonesia, and there's the so they're touring the Come Taste the Band album. They get a gig in Indonesia. There's a dictator, President Suharto, running the country at the time. They were scheduled to play at Senayan Sports Stadium. There were 25,000 seats in the stadium. The promoter, who had ties to the military in the country, sold 125,000 tickets.
Wow.
So he's cashing in, selling way more tickets than people can fit in the stadium. Thousands of fans are locked out, so there's a fucking riot. The military comes in with machine guns and truncheons and attack dogs and injures over 200 people on the first night. So there were two concerts scheduled. They start getting pressure to add a concert, and they're kind of resisting. They're freaked out by the whole thing. They're freaked out by the violence of the military. What the fuck? What have we done here? And they don't really want to do a third concert. While these negotiations are going on, Patsy Collins, who's this road crew and bodyguard for Tommy Bolin, falls down 6 stories of an elevator shaft and dies.
Holy shit.
And the band and the crew think this is them strong arming the band,
Oh yeah.
There's no investigation ever, but
Jesus Christ.
they think he was pushed or beaten and then thrown. Yeah, and so basically the military and the promoter coerced the band at gunpoint to do another show. And basically, and I saw this in a documentary sometime years ago. I looked it up on
I've never heard this story
on AI just to refresh my memory. And they're basically, and I don't remember if they were originally scheduled for 1 or 2 shows. It's not clear from my AI notes here, but they're forced to do another show basically. And they said, and I remember in the documentary, and I don't know where this documentary is, but I remember seeing it a while back. It was the saddest show they ever played because they were really good friends with this guy.
Yeah, and he's fucking dead.
And they're having to play a show for the fuckers who killed him.
Jesus.
And they just played the show. They had to bribe officials to get out of the country, the border.
That's like the Beatles trying to get out of Jesus, where'd they go? Down in where they filmed all those exploitation movies in the 70s.
Oh, Philippines.
Philippines.
Yeah.
Same situation.
Yeah. Except their crew member didn't get murdered.
Yeah. Jesus.
Yeah. So they're forced to play a show. They fucking play it so they can get out of there and have to bribe the officials on the way out. They didn't get paid barely anything close to what they were promised. It's just a horror story. Ian Gillan calls it a horror story. They didn't play there again until 2023. which was years later with
Ian Gillan was there at that time.
Well, that's interesting. No, Ian Gillan calls it a horror story. This is according to my AI notes. The actual incident happened with
Tommy Bolin and all
in the band. Yeah, pretty sure.
Gotcha. Well, Tommy Bolin was also maintaining a solo.
Apparently, his 2 solo albums are fucking awesome.
Yeah, they're good. Private Eyes is a great record.
Yeah,
you got to check that one out if you haven't. So he's opening for Jeff Beck in Miami in '76, and gives an interview, takes a couple photos with Jeff Beck to be in a Rolling Stone or something. And they asked him something, and one of the last things Tommy Bolin says is, "I'm going to be around for a long time," and then is found a few hours later dead, heroin, cocaine, barbiturates, and alcohol.
Right.
So
famous last words.
Yeah, I'm going to do some heroin and coke, throw in some pills and a bunch of booze, and my heart stops. What? I don't get it. I don't get it. But anyway, the band finally grinds to a halt. Richie becomes the leader of Rainbow. Gets Craig Gruber, Ronnie James Dio, Richie Blackmore, and Gary Driscoll to forms Rainbow. We all know about Rainbow.
One other note from this documentary I watched was that Blackmore brings the music from Man on a Silver Mountain to the band. I guess it was during the Stormbringer sessions.
Wow.
And Ian Pace and John Lord don't want to record it because they didn't have a hand in writing it.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
David Coverdale.
If you bring that riff, to me, I'm like, how do I play it again?
Yeah, that's just how petty things had gotten at the time.
Yeah. But yeah, so Richie's doing Rainbow. Whitesnake, the first release of Whitesnake was really a David Coverdale solo album, Whitesnake, and it had Mick Moody on guitar, Tom Hinckley keyboards, and Roger Glover. So Roger Glover plays bass and produces Whitesnake and North Winds, which were the 2 David Coverdale solo albums, and then then he did a Whitesnake EP, which had John Lord, and John Lord basically is on Trouble, Love Hunter, Ready and Willing. Ian Pace comes in on, and Come and Get It had John Lord and Ian Pace. Saints and Sinners, John Lord and Ian Pace, and even up to Slide It In, John Lord's on that. So that first run of all the Whitesnake stuff is very heavily just replacing band members, and it's almost like David Coverdale kept Deep Purple going, but had the force to change the name.
I remember when that song "Slow and Easy" off of "Slide It In" was a big hit on the radio. That's a good fucking bluesy song.
Great.
I really dug it. That's when I first started paying attention to Whitesnake, and then they ruined it with the next release with all pop metal.
Yeah, but the Trouble, Love Hunter, those are great records. Those first. Now Whitesnake, his solo thing, and North Winds are very much David Coverdale trying to do a solo thing. It's not so much. It's not so much rock. It's just kind of moody late 70s kind of thing.
That's why I couldn't get through it. I tried to marathon Whitesnake before, and I never made it past the first album.
If you check out Trouble, Love Hunter, Ready and those, there's some great shit in there.
Right.
But they're cut off, obviously, as Slide It In. But then Ian Gillan does Born Again with Sabbath, and you saw that show.
Yeah, the show, the album is obviously a drop off from Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules, but the show, the live, they blew the fucking roof off the place.
Yeah, I to me, Sabbath will always be Ozzy and Dio,
Yeah,
and Ian Gillan. I I was still very much that's Black Sabbath, Ian Gillan, and then Ian leaves to get back together. Perfect Strangers,
yeah,
epic. I mean, just the perfect timing. They come out with Knocking at Your Back Door. I remember listening to Metal Shop on a Friday night. Bob Coburn was the host for that show, and it would come on at like 10 o'clock at night till midnight or something. And it was when you were 10 years old with no internet, you could put on Metal Shop and you would hear all things metal circa 81, 82, 83.
yeah.
And they open the show and you hear that dun, 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 the opening, and I'm like, what is this? And I had no clue it was Deep Purple. And by the end of the song, I'm like, holy fuck, this is...
Yeah, that was a big deal when that came out. I think I was aware of it ahead of time because of like Hit Parader and Circus Magazine and shit. But those songs,
I religiously read those magazines, and I had no clue this was coming out until
those songs, Perfect Strangers and Knocking at Your Back Door, were all over 96 Rock at the time. Just constantly being played. It was a huge deal. They had videos out on MTV, which were cool videos. It was them having fun in the studio and playing soccer around the studio. It was just very real, genuine stuff. It wasn't this White Snake fucking here I am again on my own bullshit. It was really good. It was that lineup was back, and they're making real in the middle of 1984 when you've got Van Halen, AC/DC. You got a handful of mainstream bands, and then in the new wave of British heavy metal category, you've got Priest and Maiden and Motorhead, and then a bunch of cool underground stuff. But big arena bands that are playing genuine hard rock like that with no bullshit, you didn't have a lot.
No.
So to have Deep Purple get back together,
it was
and record a classic album, and
solid record.
I'm not a big fan of Dream Theater, but apparently they cover this entire album regularly.
Really? Perfect
Strangers. They just love this album. And so this is a classic fucking album. I wouldn't put it up there with Burn and Machine Head and In Rock, but it's right below on that second level.
Yeah, it's comfortably it's comfortably on there because it is a goddamn solid record.
It's a good fucking album. Yeah.
And they would follow that record with a live album. It was a way to hear some of the songs from that album live.
And that tour was huge. In in the US, the only person who sold more tickets than Deep Purple in 1985 was Bruce Springsteen.
Wow.
They were number 2 in the US in 1985.
Insane. That's insane. And they would go on to do House of Blue Lights, which I would tell you is a horrible record.
I've never even gave it a shot.
It's just awful.
And
I haven't heard it since. I heard it the one time. And it was like, God damn.
Didn't they do an album with the singer? Who's the singer that replaced
Joe Lynn Turner?
Didn't they do a Deep Purple album with Joe Lynn Turner?
Yeah.
They called it Deep Purple.
Rainbow and And but so they have continued to put albums out from 1968 to 2024. They have 23 studio albums.
Basically, Blackmore and Gillan started arguing again. Gillan leaves. They bring in Joe Lynn Turner to do an album, and then the guys in Deep Purple. And then Blackmore told the guys in Deep Purple after that album, the band is over.
Yeah,
the band is over, and he leaves. And they were like, no, it's not. And they bring Ian Gillan back, and they get Steve Morse from the Dixie Dregs, who's a great player, to replace replace.
And that was The Battle Rages On.
Yeah.
1993.
And
and I saw that tour.
Oh, really? Was it good?
It was incredible because now I had bought tickets to see Deep Purple 5 or 6 times, and they canceled every single time.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And
I've never seen
them. I finally saw them at the House of Blues in Atlanta in '93, and it's a small club. I'm up in the up in the balcony looking down.
That's where we saw the newer version of Leonard Skinner back in the 90s.
Yeah. Perfect seats to see them. And I was so impressed that they played When a Blind Man Cries, B-side from Machine Head, and Child in Time with Steve Morse. And that was nuts. But I wanted to just the last thing I wanted, the 23 studio albums, 43 live albums, 26 compilation albums. And they've got a few high dollar box sets, but they've never, I just don't feel Deep Purple has ever truly captured a good chronological box set with live. And, they seem to cock it up or, something comes out and then it goes out of print, and you're
they should do an In Rock Through Perfect Strangers box set and just all the classic shit. I do need to tell my Steve Morse story, which I may have. Go ahead.
Before you do that, I do want to say some of the later records. There's some really, really good music on these after 1993. Much like the Motorhead albums, those later albums, there's some great shit in there. But what happens, I think a band that's been around maybe too long and people go, oh, new Deep Purple, okay. And it only sells in Europe or something. I don't know.
I'm
guilty of it. I have not listened to, but I've tried. I've heard things here and there.
I've tried to listen to some of those albums, and they have some of them have really cheap, cheesy looking covers on the cover, and that combined with the, I try and I just can't get into it. I don't think the Motorhead comparison stands up. I think if you're going to compare Motorhead's later work to somebody, it's AC/DC. It's good, solid rock and roll.
Yeah, you're not gonna.
Good enough. You're going to still listen to it. I think Deep Purple, God bless them, and I'm glad they're happy doing what they love. Whoever's left in the band these days, but it's it's just not the same as later era Motorhead. That stuff is just soul saves your soul. That music.
And what's funny is they were inaugurated into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame by a longtime fan, Lars Ulrich. Everyone was there except Richie Blackmore.
Of course, because he's a fucking dick. He's the Greg Ginn of Deep Purple. Those guys have very similar personalities.
The band said, we will not set foot on that stage if Richie Blackmore is there. So it says a lot. It says a lot.
Yeah. So I've probably told this story on a previous episode, but this is the Deep Purple episode, and Steve Morse was in Deep Purple. He was actually in Deep Purple longer than any other guitar player. So Steve Morse was in a band called the Dixie Dregs before he joined Deep Purple. He's a great fucking guitar player. Local musician told me this story. So there was this band in the 80s called the Swingin' Richards, and they were kind of Faces wannabe band with some hair metal kind of influence. And there was a guy, the guitar player in that band he called himself the Butcher. He had a local video show on we had a local video channel.
Yeah, I used to watch the shit out of that.
Yeah. And
videos and stuff.
Channel 69.
Yeah.
And so he's playing, and apparently he would, whenever he's playing, if he saw somebody air guitaring in the audience, his little routine was he'd offer them the guitar as a kind of, oh, you think you can play better than me? Here, why don't you? And they'd always kind of back away, and it was just this kind of attitude thing he had.
Right.
So Steve Morse goes, and somebody told Steve Morse about this. So
that's so good.
He goes to the show and stands in the front row and starts air guitaring. And the Butcher's an idiot. He doesn't know who this guy is. The Dixie Dregs were kind of like a fusion. They were an instrumental fusion jazz rock band.
And they were phenomenal.
Yeah. And this guy has no idea who this is. And so he's air guitaring, and the Butcher offers him the guitar. And Steve Morris reaches out, takes the guitar with one hand. And as he's pulling the guitar back to himself, he's already running up and down the fretboard with that one hand. And then he puts the guitar on and just lays out this insane, soul-shattering solo.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
And then takes the guitar back off, and he's handing it back to the Butcher, and he's still going with his fingers while he hands it back to him. And the guy that was there that telling me the story said the Butcher went and stood by his amp with his back to the audience for the rest of the show and just played the rest of the show, but he wouldn't even look at the fucking beautiful.
It is.
Yeah.
It makes me think of when Eddie Van Halen upstaged
Michael Schenker. Yeah. Similar story, yeah.
Ridiculous, but
although the Butcher is not Michael Schenker, but yeah.
No. But yeah, that's Deep Purple. A lot of music there to check out, and the offshoots are interesting. Whitesnake is decent to check out from the 78 to 84. After that, David Coverdale just took off, and Steve Vai joined, and you thought, oh my God, it'll be great, and that was awful.
It was just overproduced hair metal. They were basically like, yeah, we got to stock up the bank accounts, and they did.
Because before it was bluesy and very much a Deep Purple vehicle.
Have you ever checked out? Have you ever checked out Trapeze, Glenn Hughes' band, before Deep Purple?
Yeah, I meant John Lord and Ian Pace, not Ian Gillan and Whitesnake. But no, Trapeze, I've checked them out. Dave Holland was the drummer.
Oh yeah,
which is
we
all know about that. But,
we don't have to go there. So what was
it's very much like that British late '60s, a little proggy, it's not.
It's not mind blowing jamming shit.
Not overly.
All right.
I mean, it's worth a perusal, Trapeze, but
I got to check out the Tommy Bolin shit, and I got to jam some Vanilla Fudge. I just got to stick with it.
That's really Vanilla Fudge. I think is that's a great. I think all the bands, Zeppelin, they all wanted that heaviness that Vanilla Fudge had, and by taking what Vanilla Fudge had, they made it even heavier. But those first couple Vanilla Fudge albums are good, and they cover the Beatles all through that first album.
Everybody was covering the Beatles back then.
Yeah. But
cool.
Those are good shit. That's good stuff.
All right, kids, that's Deep Purple. We got more shit coming down the pike already scheduled. Stay tuned. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Yeah.
Peace out, motherfuckers.
Deuces.